Patricia. The dinner was excellent, as was the company. Their plates had long been brought back inside. The kitchen had been tidied up. 2 bottles had been consumed and they had just opened a third. John had turned the lights on for the deck. The ambiance and the low-voltage lighting that was built into the deck and posts was wonderful, Patricia thought. But what really amazed her was the lighting under the deck. There were several fixtures with powerful lights that lit up the river in both directions as well as the forest across the river from them. They sat on an outdoor, L-shaped sectional that was situated in one corner of the deck. The conversation continued to flow easily. John paused for a moment and looked at the third bottle they had opened. Neither of us is going to be in any shape to drive tonight. You can sleep in one of the spare rooms. Patricia gave him a small smirk. John, do you really think I'm going to be sleeping in one of your spare rooms tonight? He smiled back at her. I didn't want to have any expectations. With that comment, Patricia laughed out loud. Taking a moment to compose herself, she turned to him. Well, let's finish these glasses and then we can start on my expectations. John's smile left his face for a moment. In all seriousness, Patricia, we've both drank. I don't want to... Stop. Patricia actually put up her hand as if she were trying to stop traffic. Do you think I actually came over here to cook dinner with you and then head back to a hotel room? John smiled and Patricia continued. I wanted what I believe is about to happen between us, long before any drink touched my lips.
John had let Patricia use his master bathroom while he got ready for bed in one of the spare bathrooms. He realized that all of Patricia's clothes were back in her room at the Greenwood, so he tried to hand her a t-shirt of his to wear and looked for a pair of track pants with a drawstring. Patricia laughed at him, walked into his master bath and closed the door, leaving him holding the t-shirt. As he brushed his teeth, looking at himself in the mirror, he mentally repeated to himself, "No expectations." His nighttime rituals complete, he headed back into the bedroom. He debated for a moment before deciding to leave his boxers on as he climbed into bed. He laid there for only a moment when the door to the bathroom opened. His mantra of no expectations immediately went out the window based on what he saw before him. Patricia, standing in the doorway completely nude, awakened some expectations in John. She stood for a brief moment with the light in the bathroom silhouetting her. His assessment of her ability to be a swimsuit model when they first met was spot on. She was just tan enough to show that she spent time outdoors and not in a tanning bed. Long legs and arms, a toned stomach. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He could tell she knew the effect she was having on him. She smirked before turning out the bathroom light and sauntering over to the bed. John wasn't shocked by this. He imagined that he looked like one of those cartoon characters whose jaw hits the floor in surprise. He quickly divested himself of his boxers as she made her way to the bed. She pulled the covers back and slid under them, shimmying up next to him. Hi. Hi, back. You know you're beautiful, right? You're not too bad yourself, at least your face anyway. I plan on finding out about the rest this evening. I plan on doing some exploring of my own. Well, then let's get started, mister. With that, she put her mouth on his and kissed him deeply. They would both look back on that night and say that they made love. Even though it would be a little while longer before they said those words to one another, there was no mistaking the connection they made that evening. Any doubts either of them may have had about the path they were heading down were starting to be swept away. There are many tales of folks that had amazing intimate experiences with people that they knew, or would come to find out, they were incompatible with. This was not one of those cases. 2 people that fit together as wonderfully and beautifully as they did were rare. While they probably couldn't have explained it if asked, they both definitely felt it.
Patricia. She awoke the next morning, and after taking a second or two to get her bearings, she smiled and rolled onto her side. John was facing away from her, having rolled away at some point during the night. She slid up behind him, pressing her breasts into his back and draping her arm over him. Good morning, beautiful. John murmured. He lifted his arm to allow hers underneath, then held her hand and pulled it to his lips, giving it a kiss. They laid like that for a bit, but then John said that nature was calling him, and she confirmed the same. John said he would use the spare room, so she went into the master to relieve herself and brush her teeth. Even with the bedhead and sleep still in her eyes, the smile that looked back from the mirror was pure happiness. John cooked them breakfast, which they of course ate out on the deck. John lent her a sweatshirt to keep her warm against the cool morning air. They had a second cup of coffee and enjoyed their morning together. She opened up to him about the meeting with the creep and how she thought her supervisor might be involved. The news upset John, but she assured him she could handle it. At some point, the subject finally had to be broached, and John was the first to break. "So when do you have to leave to head back?" "I should probably leave a little after noon. Give myself time to get back, unpack, and I have some work to do as well." While John pondered this, she added, "I'll be back Tuesday, though, to meet with Rob. I'd rather not make that drive twice in one day." John smiled. "I have a spare bedroom you can use." She smacked his knee, put her coffee down, and straddled him. He held her as he reached forward to put his coffee down as well, and then pulled her into a kiss. When they finally broke free, she asked, "So you don't mind if I stay here then?" "You can stay here as long as you like." She almost replied with "forever," but felt it wise to keep that to herself for now. Instead, she just smiled and kissed him again. By the time she was halfway home, Patricia felt like a dumb teenager. She felt like she had a smile on her face the entire time. She wasn't complaining. The feeling was like nothing else that had ever happened to her. She decided to call her mother before her smile broke her face. "Hi, sweetie. You home yet?" "Hi, Mom. No, I'm about 2 hours out." "Oh, well, how was the rest of the trip?" "You said you stopped in a small town?" Patricia went on to describe the town, the art scene, the hiking, and the waterfalls. "It sounds lovely." "It was, and I met someone." This news perked her mother up a bit. Her mother knew she dated. Her mother also knew how disinteresting she found most of her dates. It got to the point that her mother wouldn't even ask how the date went, knowing that if there was anything worth talking about, Patricia would let her know. "Someone interesting, I take it." "Very." "What do you want to tell me about him?" "Mom, I want to tell you everything about him. He's that amazing. It's really quick, you know." "Sweetie, you are not the type to fall in love with every guy you see. If anything, you are the opposite. So, if you feel this strongly already, if you feel you love him, then I can't wait to meet him." "I didn't say I love him. You didn't have to."
John, Mrs. Fertig came in on Monday to pick up her car. John told her a Good Samaritan had donated an engine for her car. He didn't know if Patricia wanted it known that it was her doing. Not that anyone in town knew who she was. John cut his labor rate in half and told Mrs. Fertig she could make payments to him if necessary. She had about half the money and said she would have the other half in 2 weeks, which was fine with him. Having worked on cars for 2/3 of his life, John was able to get the rest of his jobs done that day, almost on autopilot. The rest of his thoughts were filled with the sandy blonde-haired beauty that had fallen into his life. John was still trying not to get ahead of himself. He would thankfully take what came his way in this new relationship. His head filled with wonderful thoughts, John's day passed faster than any he could remember.
Patricia. She was in the office early on Monday. Notes on the pointless and ridiculous meeting with the fat predator, as she was starting to call him in her mind, were finished and sent to the partners. She then wrote another set of notes, ones that encompassed what actually transpired at the meeting in all their pompous, sweaty detail. She had mostly pushed the meeting out of her mind while she spent time with John, choosing to focus on the chemistry and great time they shared. Going through her emails with Luke, the partner who had asked her to take the meeting, she was fully convinced she had been set up. She looked through the visitor log to see when he had been in the office. It was Thursday a week and a half ago. That lined up. That's the day she met him in the office. She was convinced, but she couldn't prove it. She pondered for a little while longer before getting up and closing the door to her office. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed the number. She talked softly into the phone. "Hi, Mom. Is Dad there too?" "Yeah, I need some advice." The phone on Patricia's desk rang. She picked up the receiver. "Patricia Holder speaking. Okay, I'll be right up." Damn it. Patricia thought. They called him. She walked out of her office and down the hall to the elevators, wondering the whole time how much her parents had told him. Normally, she would be upset. They knew that she wanted to make it on her own. She had only agreed to come to this firm if he agreed not to meddle, even a little. She put those thoughts aside as she got out of the elevator 2 floors up. The area where Patricia's office sat was nicely appointed, she always thought. This was something else. Rich wood paneling everywhere with beautiful light sconces adorning the walls. If they could have wallpapered it with actual money, they probably would have. Patricia chuckled to herself. She approached the assistant's desk at the end of the hall. "Hi, Cynthia." "Hi, Patricia. He's waiting for you. You can go right in." "Thanks." She opened one of the double doors and entered an office that was probably only slightly smaller than her apartment. The gentleman sitting behind the oak desk rose and smiled. Some lawyers, no matter how expensive the suit, no matter how well-styled the hair is, come off as smarmy. That was not this man. If Patricia had to come up with a word to describe him, it would be distinguished. Patricia made sure the door was closed, and she covered the distance between them before speaking. "Hi, Uncle Tom." She then gave him a hug of genuine love. They separated, and he looked down at her. "Do you know how hard it is to know you are a couple of floors away and that I can't come chat with my goddaughter or take her to lunch? I feel like I see you less now than when you were in law school." "I know, and while I'm sorry that we don't see each other as much as we would like, I do appreciate you honoring my wishes. If keeping our relationship a secret is what it takes to have a talented lawyer like you at the firm, then that's what I'll do. But I'll be honest, I wish I could have it both ways." "I know you do, Uncle, but you know how I am. If I didn't feel like I accomplished it on my own, anything I did here would feel cheap and unearned." "I know, dear, and I'm sure you know why you're here. Either Mom or Dad or both called you. The news you gave them was worrying enough for them both to call, but they were adamant that you stated you couldn't prove anything." "Correct, I can't. It's just a hunch." "Okay, well, your parents didn't give me the details, so why don't you run through everything with me?" Patricia spent the next 10 minutes detailing out everything to her godfather. Once she laid out all the facts, she explained her reasoning on why she felt she had been set up, stressing that she was basing her final assumption on intuition. "Well, you're right. You don't have a case as it sits now. But where there's smoke, there's often fire, so I'm having the IT team archive all his emails. In the meantime, I'm going to have you reassigned to another partner. Actually, Uncle Tom, I wanted to take the rest of the week off." The statement hung in the air for a moment as Tom contemplated it. "Patricia, if I am prying, then please don't answer. But are you asking for time off because of this incident, or is there more going on?" Patricia did not keep any secrets from him, and thus had no issues being honest. "I met someone amazing, and I'd like to spend some time with them as well as figure a few things out. If you think he's amazing, then I can't wait to meet him. I'll tell Luke you are out for the rest of the week." "Thanks, Uncle Tom." Patricia closed out the work she had left for the day, keeping her door closed and ignoring Luke's emails. She left the office early and headed to her apartment. She was going on instinct, feeling that John felt as strongly for her as she felt for him. As such, she packed for a week, hoping she wasn't overstepping. Once she finished packing, she was a nervous ball of energy. She couldn't wait to head back to John. Sleep was going to be hard to come by tonight.
John, Patricia had called him Monday evening just as he was cleaning up from dinner. She asked if she could stay Tuesday evening as she wasn't sure how long it would take to work on Rob's variants, and thus did not want to head back too late. John said of course she could. Honestly, regardless of how long it took to help Rob, we would have asked her to stay. John pondered on these thoughts for a bit. How to make sense of them. Life experience tells us to be cautious, to go slowly, lest we open ourselves to sudden hurt. The logical part of his brain was screaming that they, were moving too fast. He pushed those thoughts aside. Not easy for a mechanic and former engineering student. You need to analyze problems in those disciplines, to pick apart the issue into its base pieces so that you can put together a solution around them. John knew that wouldn't work here. There was no problem to pick apart. Everything about the two of them had been perfect so far. The old cliché of "I've never felt this way before" came to mind. It was true though, wasn't it? He could honestly say it was. He had girlfriends over the years too. He told he loved them, and he did. None like this though. Not that he was ready to tell Patricia yet, but he saw that time fast approaching. This was a new experience. To have his mind filled with thoughts that didn't require him to problem solve. He could simply enjoy the pleasure of thinking about a beautiful woman and where their journey might take them. Like Patricia, sleep came slowly that evening for John. Thoughts of a hopeful journey consuming him.
Patricia had called John to tell him she had arrived at Rob's. She had gone through all the paperwork Rob had and decided to speak to the folks at the town offices to feel them out. She was not known in town and did not want to ruffle any feathers as she went through the process of getting his variance approved. She called Rob after stopping at the town municipal building to bring him up to speed and schedule the next time she would be at his office. She was now on her way to John's shop. Patricia loved driving through new places. She felt she noticed so much more when the scenery is new to the senses. She went back to a memory, a childhood friend she had drinks with after college. The friend talked about an old barn that had finally been torn down in their hometown. The friend told of how it made her sad as they had visited often with other children that lived near her, all within walking distance of the barn. Patricia could not remember the barn at all, even though it could be seen from a road they often traveled on. It wasn't until she was shown pictures before its demolition that she vaguely remembered the structure. This brief conversation, one that would normally be forgotten by both participants not long after it happened, affected Patricia. The next time she visited her parents' home, she made it a point to drive around the area, trying to pick out things she had never noticed before. It amazed Patricia, all the little details she had never noticed before. The dirt road that led to an abandoned homestead, still passable, most likely due to teenagers using it as a hangout. The hand-laid foundation stones that she passed nearly every day, yet had never noticed. Some later research showed that the foundation was from a home that dated back to the mid-1800s. The memory made her smile. She soaked in the vibrancy of the details the town offered her, knowing they would eventually fade, and she would have to concentrate more to see them. Side roads and homesteads, foundations and abandoned homes. They all fascinated her. She made a mental note to ask John to take a ride and see what backstory he could give her about these places.
John. He heard the car pull up and his intuition told him it was Patricia. The certainty of that feeling is comforting, although it lasts only a brief moment before the mind catches up and tries to rationalize it. In this case, he needn't worry. His intuition was correct. He went to his shop sink to wash his hands. He had a feeling she would be here before he was finished. A rush job for a good customer come in and he told him he would squeeze him in, so he was later than usual in finishing up. Patricia had been taking the lead so far and he was starting to feel confident enough to reciprocate. Just as he was drying his hands, Patricia walked through the bay door and up to him to give him a kiss. He kept his lips planted on hers but backed away slightly as she tried to move into him. This repeated twice before she pulled away with a slight pouting look on her face. John laughed and quickly stated, "I don't want to get you dirty. My hands may be clean, but these overalls definitely aren't." Patricia's pout changed to an evil little grin. "What if I want to get a little dirty?" This caught John short, and he had no reply. Patricia saved him with a giggle and said, "What time are you finishing up?" "I probably have a half hour or so, then close up, so probably 45 minutes total." John said the statement as he walked into the waiting room with Patricia following him. He walked over the counter and picked up a key and handed it her. "Do you remember how to get to my place?" Yes." "Good. I don't want you waiting around here for me, and I know how much you like the deck, so I figured you could go relax and have a glass while I finish up here. I put some more drinks on the rack, so feel free to have whatever you'd like." Patricia wore a deep smile. "Well, I was going to say I don't mind waiting for you, and I don't, but that idea sounds lovely." They both smiled at each other for a moment before a thought caught Patricia. "What were you thinking for dinner? I didn't have time to stop and get anything, but I could head over to the market now." "That's okay, I bought supplies for dinner and I'll make it when I get home. It shouldn't take me too long. Oh, do you like spicy?" Spicy sounds wonderful. Would you like me to start prepping anything? No, I did some prep already, so all good. Sounds great. See you soon. With that, Patricia leaned forward and gave him a kiss, making sure not to touch his overalls. He had finished up the work at the shop and was heading home. People often have an idealized version of how an event or even a scene in their life will play out. Rarely do these events meet those visions. This was one of those rare cases when reality exceeded expectations. It wasn't that Patricia was wearing something revealing or was in some erotic pose when he walked onto the deck. It was much more subtle. The way she sat, holding her glass, wearing a smile that melted John. She was lovely, elegant, sophisticated, and certainly beautiful. John paused, taking it all in. He must have had a blank expression on his face, his mind racing to process the perfection he saw, because Patricia's smile dipped for just a moment. John forced his brain back into action and smiled deeply at her. You look lovely. Her smile broadened again. Before I stare at you too long, I'm going to head inside and take a shower. Then I'll start dinner. I'll come in and help you. John paused for a moment. It was his turn to put on an evil grin. I meant with dinner, but don't worry. I plan on helping you with some other things after dinner. John laughed. Sounds wonderful. I'll be back in a bit. They sat on the deck enjoying their drinks. John had made a chicken curry that they put over rice. It was a simple, filling, and flavorful meal he enjoyed making. They didn't talk as much this evening, content to enjoy each other's company and the scenery. John had work in the morning, so as it started to get dark, they agreed to clean up and head back inside. Finished with the dishes and their drinks, they headed up the stairs to the bedroom. Patricia turned into the spare room, which caught John short. Realizing this may happen, she turned to face him as he had stopped in the hallway. I put my toiletries in the bathroom in here. I'm just going to get ready and I'll join you shortly. She stepped back into the doorway, gave him a quick kiss, and turned around to head to the bathroom. John's heart restarted and he headed to his bathroom to get ready for bed. Nightly rituals complete, he paused for a moment at his bed and then took off his boxers. He normally slept in them, but Patricia had all but stated that the evening was not ending yet. He laid in bed enjoying the anticipation. A figure appeared in his doorway. She stood there, wearing a see-through teddy. Nothing on underneath it. John had seen her naked. He had explored every inch of the perfection that was her body. Somehow this was even more exciting, the hint of the beauty that lay beneath just adding to the anticipation. John got back out of bed. This was a present he wanted to unwrap, slowly, not hindered by sheets or the difficulty of trying to take it off while lying down. John moved towards her. He gently kissed her while lightly moving his fingers down her arms, causing goosebumps to appear. He kissed her cheek, which caused her to giggle, and then moved to her neck, which caused her to release a subtle gasp. He moved his kisses down, kissing just above where the fabric started. He then kneeled and nuzzled his face into the sheer fabric over her belly. His hands ran up the back of her calves and thighs, under the fabric, and squeezed her butt. He started to rise, raising his hands, and Patricia's lingerie with him. She raised her arms and allowed him to pull it over her head. Patricia smiled at him. Sorry, you looked absolutely beautiful in this. But it was spoiling the view. I'm not EEP exclamation mark. John lifted her up and spun to place her on the bed, her butt at the edge, and went down on her. John started slowly, but it didn't take long for her to finish. Patricia rolled on her side and curled up partially, still panting heavily. John was still on his knees, enjoying the view of the lithe body on his bed. After a few moments, she recovered enough to turn and look at him, eyes slightly glassy. I've never experienced anything like that before. That could have been taken in a few different ways, but John was fairly certain that she had enjoyed it. He smiled at her, started to stand, and responded, I'm going to go clean up real quick, and I'll be right back. Oh no, you don't. Patricia sprung up and grabbed him by the neck, pulling him down on her and kissing him deeply. She started to roll over and John obliged, Patricia now straddling and still kissing him. Patricia pulled her face away and smiled at him. She hopped off and pulled his legs up so they were fully on the bed. She worked her way lower and lower until eventually she had taken it all in. She choked slightly and alternated like this until she felt his legs start to tense and she knew he was getting close. Patricia turned her body around and swung a leg over his head. She sat down on his face. She pulled up slightly, allowing him to breathe. She got back to working on him until eventually she got every drop out of him. As their shaking subsided, she lifted up slightly, allowing him to gasp a breath. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I got carried away there." "You have nothing to apologize for. That was amazing." Coming down from his high, he now felt a little sheepish about the liberties he took with her. I hope I didn't cross any lines. Absolutely not." She thought for a moment before continuing. "If I feel completely comfortable with someone, I like to get a little dirty in the bedroom. It's just never happened this quickly with someone before." It was now Patricia's turn to feel a little embarrassed until John spoke. "Well, I'm happy that you feel comfortable with me. I feel the same way about you, otherwise I would never have tried those things." They lay entangled for a moment before deciding they should clean up again for bed. After they finished in the bathrooms, they spooned in bed, John gently caressing her with one hand while she held onto the other one. John then softly spoke in her ear. "I wish you didn't have to leave tomorrow." It was an opening Patricia had been hoping for, but now that it arrived, there was a bit of worry on her part. She did not want to push John and make him feel they were moving too fast. I don't actually have to leave tomorrow." This piqued John's curiosity. "What do you mean? I thought you had to go back to work." "I took the rest of the week off." "Is this because of the meeting with that creep and what you suspect of your boss? You wanted some time away?" It was an easy out. She could have just said yes, but it would have been a lie. And if this new relationship was going to develop into what she thought it could be, then she had to be honest. "No, it's not 'cause of that." She rolled over to face him. "I took the week off because I was hoping to spend it with you." Any worry she may have had completely dissipated with the broad smile that adorned John's face. "I would really like that." With that, John kissed her, smothering any remaining fear she may have had.
Patricia. The rest of the week was just as wonderful for Patricia. John still had to work, so she spent her time exploring. She took photos of all the interesting structures she came across. The abandoned ones particularly fascinated her, as she felt like they had a story to tell but no one left to tell it. She stopped at the town museum a couple of times during the week to show her photos and ask what they knew about the histories of the structures. The stories fascinated her. She also hiked more sections of the trails and visited more of the waterfalls, although the first she visited was still her favorite. Patricia took time every day to get a sandwich and a snack for John, and they would eat lunch together at the counter in his waiting room. They spent the first part of Saturday driving around the area, John showing her the sights he found interesting, or just sharing tidbits of history on the different places they passed. They stopped at the market to pick up some items to make dinner that evening, as well as more drinks. The whole week there had been a little itch in the back of Patricia's mind. For the first few days she had refused to scratch it, instead pushing it back so she could enjoy the time she had with John. By Saturday, the itch was starting to burn, and she could no longer push it away. She would have to leave tomorrow to head home. She would have to go back to reality on Monday, the thought of which made her feel like she would be heading to her execution. Her job was secure. That was not her worry. The issue, of course, was how could she go back to that life? She had a taste of life here, and having had it, she did not want to give it up. The souring of her mood was starting to show. She wanted to hide it from John, to not make it his problem, but it kept eating at her. They were cutting up vegetables to prep for dinner. Patricia was deep in thought and not paying attention. She actually hadn't been paying much attention since they got back to the house. John put down his utensils and walked to where she was standing at the island. He gently reached out and guided her hand. She just stared at it, wanting to hide her feelings but knowing she couldn't. John gently turned her to face him. "Patricia, what's wrong?" She looked up at him and then looked down. "It's nothing." He lifted her head by her chin. "If it's nothing, then why are you starting to cry?" She was. She couldn't help it. The tears started to run down her face. She started to sob slightly, trying to hold in so she didn't completely break down. John just held her and waited as she let out little sobs. When she had quieted down a little, he released her and stepped back. He looked directly at her. "Tell me what's the matter." She had trouble holding his gaze. It's just... I don't want to go back. Go back to work? I can't say I blame you after what happened. No, not just work. Back to that life. I mean, yes, my life revolved around work. Being a junior associate means I worked 60 hours a week minimum. It's not the work I mind, it's the lifestyle. She paused for a long moment. John waited for her to continue. It's just not fulfilling. John took hold of her hands. Her mind was whirling. As a lawyer, every statement was calculated, gone over and over again to ensure it elicited the desired response or emotion. She couldn't do that here. Her instincts told her she had to speak with her emotions, from her heart. The fear of pushing John too fast returned. She went ahead anyway. I'd rather be here. She looked up into his eyes. With you. John didn't hesitate. I'd like you here with me. But don't you think we're moving too fast? Is that what you think? No, but I think it's what other people would think. I can almost hear some of my girlfriend's advice. You're moving too fast? You barely know each other. She drifted off, contemplating what some of her more vocal girlfriends would say. None of it positive regarding the speed of their relationship. She could tell John was thinking about what she had just said. I still remember a conversation with my father. He gave me some advice about a situation. I really didn't agree with his advice, but figured he knew better, and so I followed his advice to the letter. The situation didn't turn out as I hoped, and I went back to him and called him on it. He said, "That's why it's called advice and not a command." I replied, "What do you mean?" He said, "If I command you to do something, it's because I know the outcome. If I'm giving you advice, it's because there are too many possibilities to know all the outcomes. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut." She could see that John was reliving the moment in his mind. She found it sweet, seeing how he was reminiscing about sage advice from his father. He looked back to her and smiled and stated, "My gut tells me this is right, that we are right." She fell into his arms and hugged him tightly. A few more tears came, happy ones this time, and she felt her mood shift. She broke their embrace and looked up at him. He looked down at her and asked, "So what do you want to do?" "I want to quit, and I don't want to live in the city anymore." "So quit." "Move in with me." "It's what I hoped you'd say. But it also scares me." "Of course, change is scary." "I'd have to figure out what to do for work." "You don't want to be a lawyer anymore?" "I do. I just don't know how much of a need there is for one here." "There's a huge need. Our only lawyer in town retired a few years ago. It's not like this area has a ton of lawyers, so we normally travel to find one. It's why they wanted so much money from Rob for his thing. They really don't want to do it, so they make sure they are getting paid well if they do." Sudden excitement immediately replaced her momentary despair. The thoughts of being a lawyer in the town, of providing a service to a small community that sorely needed it, sounded fulfilling. A broad smile crossed her face, and she looked back up at John, who was returning her smile. She reached up and grabbed his head, pulling him down for a kiss. When their kiss finally broke, she looked into his eyes. "I love you." "I love you too." Patricia called her parents during her drive home on Sunday. She knew how supportive they were of her, but still expected at least a slight amount of skepticism regarding the choices she was making. There was none. They were completely supportive, even asking if she wanted them to call her uncle to let him know. She declined. She knew her uncle would be sad she was leaving, but also knew how much he loved her. In the end, she knew he would support her. When she got home, she fired up her laptop to send an email to Cynthia for time on her uncle's calendar. She needn't have bothered. There was already an invite for 9 a.m. Monday morning. That was interesting. She hoped her parents hadn't called him anyway. After pondering it for a moment, she figured they wouldn't do that. She'd just have to wait until tomorrow to see. She left the email for later. She put a load of laundry in and had a salad for dinner. She then tackled her emails and readied herself for bed, then called John. realizing after their conversation was over that she had a smile on her face the whole time. Patricia was in the office early as usual on Monday morning. She was dreading Luke stopping by but figured she'd deal with that if it happened. She responded to his emails that dealt with client issues, ignoring his questions about where she had been and why she hadn't even notified him she was taking time off. She knew it wasn't professional, but given her suspicions about what he had done, she didn't care. It was about 20 to 9 when her phone rang. It was Cynthia asking if she could come up now. She left her desk and headed up to his office. "Hi, Cynthia. Good morning." "Good morning, Patricia. One moment." Cynthia picked up the phone and dialed. "Patricia is here. Okay." She hung up the phone. "You can go in, Patricia." "Thank you." Patricia opened the door and headed into the office. She closed the door, turned, and froze. The look on her uncle's face was grim, but what really grabbed her attention was Luke sitting in one of the chairs in front of the desk. Her uncle looked at him. "Well?" Luke stood and faced Patricia, but wouldn't meet her eyes. "Patricia, what I did was, disgusting, and I never should have put you in that position. I'm extremely sorry." Patricia didn't know what to say to him. He wasn't forgiven, and she wasn't expecting this scenario. Before she got too far down her line of thought, her uncle spoke. "Good, Luke. You can leave now." He turned and walked towards the door, his eyes never meeting Patricia's. After the door closed, she turned to her uncle, the confusion on her face very apparent to the man. "I went through some of his emails this week. What I saw was disturbing enough that the senior partners decided an investigation was in order. From what was uncovered, I believe your suspicions were correct. There were also enough other unsavory acts on his part that the senior partners decided to end his partnership at the firm. Given the evidence we have, the firm will not be refunding his partnership buy-in." The shock on her face must have been evident, because he asked her to sit. Patricia moved to the other chair in front of the desk and sat slowly, still processing everything she just heard. Once seated, her uncle continued. "I explained to him that a direct apology to you would be a step in the right direction. We're still going through all his communications, and I'm not certain there is enough to forward to the police yet. But I explained that if he didn't start trying to make amends, at a minimum our firm would not be shy in sharing our thoughts on him if he tried to join another firm." Patricia just sat with her mouth agape. "In conclusion, you will no longer have to worry about reporting to Luke. We will also be terminating our relationship with his unsavory client today." Patricia's found her voice. "Wow. I have to say, of everything I expected this morning, this wasn't even a consideration." "Well, a positive development is that in reading Luke's emails, I was able to become more familiar with the work you've accomplished here so far. Obviously, Luke gave me updates, but seeing firsthand, I have to say that I'm very impressed at what you've done for us. I'm also unsurprised. I know you are, Uncle. You've always been so supportive. How could I do anything but my best for your firm?" She took a breath before continuing. "Which is why this is so hard. You're leaving." Patricia's mouth dropped open again. "How did you know?" "I hope you don't mind my prying, but when you told me you met someone, I called your parents. They told me they had never heard you speak about someone like you speak about John. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. I hope you're not disappointed. You know how I feel about you and how appreciative I am of everything you've done for me. On the contrary, your happiness is my top priority. If leaving to pursue what lies ahead for you and John will make you happy, then you have my full support." Patricia started to tear up a bit. "I think it will." With that, she stood and came around the desk to give her uncle a hug. Patricia couldn't just pack up that day and leave. Her lease still had several months on it, and more importantly, she had work for the firm that had to be either completed or handed off to other lawyers in the firm. It would take the better part of 2 months to finish all the tasks. She went to see John every weekend, taking off Friday afternoons to get her weekend started early. A bag already packed and in her car waiting. Giving her notice allowed the proverbial cat out of the bag regarding her uncle, and he made time at least once a week for them to have lunch together. Patricia cherished these lunches with him, knowing how influential he, as well as her parents, had been in her dream to become a lawyer. On her weekend visits to John, she also started looking at offices for rent. After a couple of weeks, she had settled on an office right on Main Street in town. She started the work necessary to set up her own business. The lease for the office had been signed a couple of weeks before she finished up at the firm. John headed over to the office many evenings during the week to start getting it up to snuff for a hot fancy lawyer, as he put it. She would help on the weekends, pausing occasionally to christen her office, as John put it. She would still smile years later when she thought of the acts performed on the desk in her office while they were renovating. If only the clients knew. Patricia was stressed at the thought of trying to find an assistant, until John found out and suggested Mrs. Fertig. While she did not have experience in a law firm, she learned quickly and kept the office running smoothly, including spending a couple of months training her replacement when she was able to comfortably retire a few years later. They were married within the year. They both knew it was inevitable, in the best way possible. So why wait? Patricia insisted that they get married on their deck over the river. John was a little hesitant at first, suggesting that maybe she wanted a bigger affair than his deck could provide. Patricia said she wanted to spend the time with those closest to her, not with dozens of people she hadn't seen in years. John couldn't argue with her logic. It was a lovely wedding with about 30 people attending. The next couple of years were spent getting her practice firmly established. At least that's the way Patricia remembered it. In truth, she was providing a service that the town and surrounding areas sorely needed. While she would never earn the type of money a partnership in a big firm would offer, it was more than enough for her and John to live very comfortably. More important, the work was fulfilling. They waited a few years before starting their family. A girl, Taylor, was born first, followed 2 years later by John Jr. As they grew up, Taylor showed a flair for art, while John Jr. was following his father to the shop on Saturday mornings by the time he was 10.
John Jr. had taken over running the shop. He ended up expanding it and within a couple of years hired 2 more mechanics to help handle the volume of work. John still went in to help, satisfied to just pick up his work orders and get the jobs done while his son ran the business. Taylor had become a moderately successful artist. She found further success in her photography and published several photo books documenting the history of mining towns in the area. He often reflected on how his life turned out, the sudden turn it took due to a broken-down car and the fortuitous meeting of a beautiful woman. In hindsight, it was probably easier than it should have been. John never referred to it as luck or chance. Sometimes life just works out if you live it with no expectations.